I want you to close your eyes for a second if you can. Just try to picture yourself standing on a city pavement.
Right. Just really put yourself there.
Yeah. It's a warm bank holiday weekend. Specifically, it's Saturday, May 2nd, 2026. You're standing on Coldharbour Lane in Brixton.
And it's a nice night, right?
It is. The air is a generous 16 degrees Celsius. There's music playing. You can smell jerk seasoning from a barbecue just sort of mingling with the exhaust of the ME5 bus.
It's that classic London summer evening feel.
Exactly. You hear hundreds of people simply exhaling after a long week. It feels deeply rooted, It feels like a community in motion.
Completely alive.
Right. And then at exactly 1:14 a.m., rapid fire discharges from a moving vehicle. They tear through that crowd.
Wow.
In an instant, 4 people fall, a celebration is shattered, and that entire sense of safety just vanishes.
It is a profound, incredibly sudden rupture of everyday life.
It really is.
And when you look at the sources for our deep dive today, the police operational timelines, the architectural blueprints, and the raw sociological data from that night, you realize you aren't just looking at the forensics of a crime.
No, you're looking at something much bigger.
Right. What's fascinating here is that you are looking at a collision. It's a collision of urban architecture, of deeply entrenched community history, and, frankly, of collective trauma.
Yeah.
To understand the gravity of those shots fired at 1:14 a.m., we can't simply read the police reports. We have to really understand the physical and psychological space where those bullets landed.
Absolutely. And to understand why this specific community was gathered so densely in that exact spot, we have to look at the environment that dictated their movements.
The physical layout.
Right. Because Coldharbour Lane isn't just a road you use to commute. It functions as a spine. It's this psychological and social artery running from the commercial center of Brixton up toward Camberwell.
It carries a lot of weight, that street.
So much weight. It bears the heavy, often really uncomfortable friction of modern gentrification. You have these brand new, highly curated cocktail bars sitting literally shoulder to shoulder with decades-old Jamaican bakeries and halal butchers.
It's a street of immense social pressure.
It is. And looming directly over the site of this gathering is a structure that dictates the entire mood, the entire flow of life on that stretch of the lane. Southwyck House.
Right, Southwyck House.
And here's where it gets really interesting, architecturally speaking, because if you aren't familiar with Southwyck House, well, locals know it almost exclusively as the barrier block.
It has such a distinct, almost intimidating look.
It does. It was designed in 1981 by an architect named Magda Barawiecka, and it looks the way it does, this massive, zigzagging, horseshoe-shaped concrete wall with these tiny slit-like windows, because it was originally built to be a brutalist sound barrier.
Wait, a sound barrier? For what?
Well, it was supposed to physically shield the residents behind it from a massive 6-lane elevated motorway called Ringway 1, but that highway was never actually built.
Wow. What's fascinating here is how the cancellation of that highway left the community with this colossal piece of defensive architecture, right? Built for a threat that just never materialized.
A phantom threat.
Exactly. And that phantom threat ended up shaping the social dynamics of the 176 households living inside it for the next 40 years.
Because the building forces a certain way of living.
It does. The design of a building actively dictates how humans interact with one another. Because of those tiny slit windows, the building essentially turns a blind eye to the street below.
Right.
There are very few natural sight lines from the living rooms down to the pavement. It's incredibly closed off.
It is, and I've seen urban planners and outsiders describe that building as a fortress or even a prison just because of that sheer concrete facade.
Which is an easy assumption to make from the outside.
Right, but when you read the sociological assessments from the residents themselves, they describe it entirely differently. They describe it as a citadel.
A citadel. That's a really specific distinction.
It is, and there's a massive mechanical difference between those two concepts. I mean, a fortress is designed purely to keep enemies out, to isolate. But a citadel is a self-contained, elevated village.
Right, it has its own internal life.
Exactly. The architecture features these narrow internal walkways and concrete decks. Those aren't just corridors. They act as internal suspended streets where neighbors cross paths, share information, look out for one another safely away from the ground level.
It's essentially a sanctuary in the sky.
Yes, a sanctuary.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture of that bank holiday weekend, the mechanics of that citadel become a crucial vulnerability.
How so?
Well, Because Southwyck House provides such a tight-knit internal community, but turns a blind, defensive face to the street, the gathering outside was placed in this paradoxical position.
Oh, I see, because the party was outside?
Right. The barbecue wasn't happening behind a gate or in a private protected garden.
Yeah.
The sheer density of the building forced the celebration out onto the open pavement.
The architecture effectively blurred the lines.
Completely. It blurred the lines between a private neighborhood gathering and the deeply exposed public space of Coldharbour Lane. It made the community incredibly fluid, but entirely unprotected from whatever was moving down that artery.
And because they were exposed on that spine, when a vehicle drove past central Brixton toward Camberwell, the violence was able to strike the very doorstep of this vertical village.
It's just devastating.
It is. And the operational data detailing that fracture is, it's chillingly clinical.
The timeline is incredibly tight.
It is. At 1:14 and 5 seconds a.m., audio sensors and witnesses confirm rapid-fire discharges from a vehicle moving at moderate speed.
Just driving by.
Just driving by. And within 55 seconds, by 1:1 a.m., the first 999 calls are logged by Metropolitan Police Command and Control. The transcripts note mass panic, screaming, and multiple casualties bleeding on the pavement.
The sheer speed of the emergency response there really highlights the catastrophic nature of the trauma.
Yeah, it was immediate chaos.
Right. By 1:18 a.m., just 4 minutes after the shots were fired, the Metropolitan Police establish a hot zone and begin crude casualty triage.
4 minutes. That's nothing.
It's incredibly fast. By 1:21 a.m., the London Ambulance Service arrives with 4 separate crews. And by 1:28 a.m., a trauma team from London's air ambulance, the HEMS team, is physically on the ground.
On the ground, meaning they are doing surgery on the street.
Exactly. We are talking about advanced surgical intervention, potentially open chest procedures happening directly on the concrete where people were just dancing minutes prior.
God. The on-the-ground reporting, specifically from Brixton Buzz, captures this haunting visual of the aftermath that really stays with you.
The scene the next morning.
Yeah. Once the sun comes up, you have these white-suited forensic teams methodically picking through the grass outside the barrier block. But they aren't just logging brass shell casing.
Oh, they're logging the party.
Exactly. They are picking through the physical debris of joy. The street is littered with paper plates, half-eaten barbecue, and hundreds of silver nitrous oxide canisters.
I mean, the juxtaposition is staggering. You have the vibrant remnants of a communal high precipice pressed violently against the clinical coldness of a major crime scene cordon.
It's so jarring.
And what the sociological reports highlight is the profound trauma of the cleaning ritual that followed days later.
I want to focus on that cleaning ritual, actually, because it sounds devastating.
It really is.
The residents of Southwyck House eventually had to come out of their citadel, walk down to the pavement, and sweep up those party supplies themselves.
Just unimaginable.
They are picking up laughing gas canisters from the exact spots where their neighbor's blood was washed away by the fire brigade.
It is a form of collective psychological endurance. Because the physical act of sweeping up the party forces the community to physically process the tragedy over and over again.
Every sweep of the broom.
Right. They're attempting to restore order to a space that has been irrevocably violated. And that violation forces us to look at exactly who was left bleeding on that pavement.
Yeah, the victims. The 4 victims struck by the gunfire were all male. Their ages were 21, 25, 47, and 70.
4 distinct generations of a single community, struck down in the exact same fraction of a second.
The 25-year-old suffered multiple gunshot wounds to the torso. He was the one stabilized on the street by that HEMS team and rushed to a level 1 major trauma center.
Barely holding on.
Right. The sources indicate he remains in a critical, life-threatening condition. And the community voices in our deep dive materials, they don't just describe this as a tragic medical emergency, they describe it as a stolen prime.
A stolen prime. That's a heavy phrase.
It's the suspension of a young man's future, his potential entirely put on hold by a piece of flying lead.
And while the 21-year-old and the 47-year-old suffered severe but non-life-threatening injuries, it's really the presence of the 7-year-old victim that has become the profound, agonizing symbol of this event for the neighborhood.
He suffered a gunshot wound to a lower extremity. He survived, thankfully, but his presence on that pavement carries immense weight.
He's a pensioner.
Exactly. A man who represents the deeply rooted history of Brixton. This is someone who has likely lived through decades of intense urban upheaval.
He's seen it all.
He was there for the uprisings of the 1980s, the heavy-handed policing of the 90s, the aggressive gentrification of the 2000s. He survived all of that, only to be struck down on his own street, under a spring sky, doing absolutely nothing but standing with his neighbors.
Which forces us to examine the specific nature of the violence itself, because it alters the entire psychological landscape of the area.
Okay, let's unpack this carefully. The senior investigating officer, Detective Chief Inspector Alan Bongu, explicitly classified this as an act of indiscriminate violence.
Right, indiscriminate.
But I have to push back here a little. In an area that has historically complex, well-documented gang dynamics, is any drive-by shooting truly random? Or is indiscriminate just the convenient label the police deploy when they're completely stuck, lack a motive, and don't know who the intended target was?
That is a very valid skepticism. But in police procedure, particularly within the Metropolitan Police, indiscriminate is not a filler word for unsolved.
Okay, so what does it actually mean operationally?
It is a very specific high-threshold classification. It fundamentally changes how investigators categorize the threat. It means that after analyzing all the data, there was absolutely no common profile among the 4 victims.
None at all.
None. There was no shared gang affiliation, no shared criminal history, and no prior relationship between any of the victims and the suspects in that phantom vehicle.
So they weren't looking for someone specific.
Exactly. The shooter did not track a specific individual to that party. They simply arrived, pointed a weapon at a dense crowd of human beings, and fired.
But think about the psychological toll of that reality for a second. If violence is targeted, if it's over a specific debt or a specific turf, the mind can sort of process it.
It has a logic to it, however grim.
Right. But if there are no rules to follow to avoid becoming a victim, how does a community continue to function? How do you confidently walk out your front door to buy milk if the only reason someone was shot was because they occupied a specific physical coordinate at 1:23 a.m.?
This raises an incredibly important psychological concept known as the just world theory.
The just world theory.
Yes. As human beings, our brains desperately need to believe that the world makes logical sense. We construct this mental armor by believing that if we follow the social contract, if we pay our taxes, if we don't involve ourselves in organized crime, if we are generally good people, we will be shielded from catastrophic violence.
We think we're safe because we follow the rules.
Exactly. We insulate ourselves with the logic of targeted violence. We tell ourselves that happens to other people involved in other things.
But when a 70-year-old grandfather and a 21-year-old are shot side by side, that mental armor completely disintegrates.
It shatters. The just world theory is entirely destroyed in that community, and what replaces it is a chronic state of hypervigilance.
Because anyone could be next.
Right. The violence no longer belongs to a specific criminal subculture. It becomes the terrifying, heavy burden of anyone who simply happens to be standing on the pavement.
And what makes the destruction of that just world theory so devastating is that for the residents of Southwyck House, this isn't a new phenomenon.
No, it's a pattern.
It isn't an isolated anomaly that they can just write off as a freak occurrence. The sources actually refer to the history of this specific stretch of pavement as a ledger of trauma.
A ledger.
Yeah.
That implies a debt that just keeps growing.
Exactly. And we have to look at the mechanisms of how that trauma layers over time. It isn't just a list of dates. It's a compounding weight.
The physical environment holds a very long memory.
It really does. In December 1987, a 27-year-old man named Michael Johnson was shot in the head outside Southwyck House. He died 2 days later, and that murder remains unsolved.
39 years ago.
Right. Now think about the 47-year-old man who was shot on May 2nd, 2026. He would have been a child living in or around that building when Michael Johnson was killed.
Wow. He grew up in the shadow of that.
Fast forward to June 2020. A double shooting outside the barrier block leaves 2 people hospitalized. June 2021, a shooting and stabbing on nearby Moorfield Road triggers a massive police response involving riot shields.
It just keeps happening.
August 2024, a man is shot in the leg during a Jamaican Independence Day party. You have generations of people who have learned to associate communal celebration outside their homes with the sudden onset of mass casualty triage.
And there is a cruel, almost perverse architectural irony at play here, with the brutalist design of Southwyck House.
Because it was built as a sound barrier.
Exactly. But we have to look at how that concrete functions mechanically. It was designed to block the low, rumbling noise of highway traffic from reaching the internal flats.
Right, the highway that was never built.
Yes. But sheer, flat, poured concrete acts as a massive acoustic sounding board. When a firearm is discharged at the base of the building, the sound waves travel outward and upward. They hit that zigzagging facade and bounce. The concrete literally amplifies the sharp, high-frequency crack of gunfire, funneling it directly into those slit windows.
So it makes it louder for the people inside.
Exactly. The building, designed to protect its residents from the noise of the outside world, acts as a massive amplifier for urban violence.
That is horrific.
The trauma doesn't just happen on the street. The acoustics ensure it vibrates violently into the living rooms of 176 families.
Following this most recent fracture, the Metropolitan Police promised an increased police presence. They established a massive digital cordon. They are pulling cell site data, scraping dashcam footage from Uber and Bolt drivers, analyzing Ring doorbell cameras.
A massive dragnet.
But the sociological assessments pose a deeply uncomfortable question for you to consider. When you live in a community that has just survived an indiscriminate mass shooting, does seeing a high-visibility police vest reassure you? Or does it serve as a constant walking reminder that a phantom vehicle is still circling the city somewhere?
It creates a profound, exhausting tension. I mean, the physical blue and white police tape was removed a few days after the shooting. The street was reopened.
Back to normal.
But an invisible cordon of fear remains firmly in place. People naturally walk faster. They subconsciously check their sight lines. They tense up when a car slows down to parallel park.
Because that car could be the phantom vehicle.
Exactly. And DCI Bangu made a very direct public appeal, specifically quoting reference CAD 5572 May, asking the community for actionable intelligence.
By publicly classifying it as indiscriminate, the police are utilizing a very specific strategy there, aren't they?
They are. By explicitly removing the gang narrative, the police are essentially telling the neighborhood, this wasn't a targeted hit, they shot a grandfather. No one is safe until these perpetrators are caught.
They're trying to force cooperation.
Yes. It is a strategic attempt to break the historic wall of silence in an area that has carried a deeply complex, often fraught relationship with the police since the Brixton uprisings.
That's a huge ask.
It is. The police are asking a community to trust an institution they historically fear in order to catch a phantom vehicle they currently fear. It's a plea that relies entirely on a shared need for collective survival.
Which brings us back to the present day. If you walk down Coldharbour Lane this afternoon, the physical mess is entirely gone. The nitrous oxide canisters have been swept up and binned.
The chalk is washed away.
Right. The rain washed away the forensic outlines. The 35 bus is running its normal route. On the surface, to an outsider, the street looks exactly the same. But as our sources heavily emphasize, the air feels completely different.
It feels incredibly heavy.
Because the physical environment heals exponentially faster than the psychological one. The architecture remains immovable, but the people moving through it are forever altered. The community is attempting to return to a baseline state of normalcy that, frankly, no longer exists.
So what does this all mean ultimately?
Well, when you strip away the forensic data points, the police appeals, and the architectural history of the barrier block, you are left looking at a devastating intergenerational wound. Yeah.
You have a 25-year-old fighting for his life in a trauma center, representing the community's future and its potential. You have a 70-year-old pensioner, representing the community's resilient, deeply rooted past. Both the future and the past, silenced and bleeding on the pavement in the exact same second.
And hovering over all of it is the terrifying, unresolved reality of that phantom vehicle. I mean, they fired into a crowd, shattered a community's sense of safety, and just vanished into the night.
Without a trace?
It leaves a neighborhood to constantly ask, why us? While knowing there is no logical answer to be found.
It is a haunting reality. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day, just looking at the city around you. We live in an era of unprecedented digital surveillance. London is essentially a modern panopticon.
Cameras everywhere.
Between the ANPR license plate readers, the CCTV on every corner, the Ring cameras on every door, and the cell towers tracking our every step, we are the most watched society in human history.
And yet, despite terabytes of data being captured every single second, a vehicle can drive down a crowded street, unleash rapid-fire terror, and completely disappear into the digital noise. The cameras didn't protect the 70-year-old pensioner. They merely documented his fall.
They just recorded the trauma.
Exactly. So you have to ask yourself, are the vast surveillance networks we've built actually providing the safety they promised? Or are we simply funding high-definition archives of our own terrifying vulnerability?